Jonna Lacey. And please let us see your name and organization, because if you're asking questions, etc., we'd like to be able to refer to you by name. So rename yourself if necessary. Want to let you know a little bit about our upcoming programs, which are free for members. And our next program will be September 19th at 12 noon. And that is going to be earmarks and how to prepare for the ask with Pernell Bryce III, who is coming to us from the Children's Health Fund. Maureen, did I get that right?
Yep.
Pernell is a real expert at this, and he will provide a guide to applying for limited project funding directly through members of Congress and state legislatures. And the timing of this event is such that it's intended to help you have the time to take what he says and get ready, get your program together. We are also having an annual virtual breakfast for consultants on September 12th at 9:30 a.m. And that's going to be kind of like a special connections call, but for consultants. So please bring all your questions about billing, pricing, client management, anything. And if you want to let us know in advance, we'll drop our email address in the chat, and you can email us at info.gplh@gmail.com. Our next connections call for members will be on October 10th at 9:30 a.m. And we want to let you know that we have these mapped out for the rest of 2024, and you can go look at the website, gplh.org, for the full calendar. So you can plan for when you might want to attend these. For those who are new to this, that's a time where we share intel, problems. There are no stupid questions. Everything is held in confidence, and it's a very collegial, supportive environment. So we support each other this way and hope you will join us. And once again, that is for members only. And if you are not a member and you have paid for this event, we will happily apply that fee to membership. There's a coupon code SAVE30, which I will put in the chat shortly. So, you can use that and join and apply the cost of this to that if you'd like to. We will distribute recordings and any handouts to registered participants. And these, of course, are always available on the GPLH member-only section of the website. That's one of our resources for members. There will be a survey sent after the program, and please submit to help us meet your interests. Please mute yourself until the end. We will monitor the chat for questions throughout the program, and there will be some time for Q&A at the end. And Jonna has said we can interrupt her if there's an urgent question about what she is presenting. So I am thrilled to introduce today's speaker, Jonna Lacey. Jonna is the CEO and founder of J.M. Lacey Communications, LLC, which focuses on writing and brand storytelling, training, and coaching. J.M. Lacey Communications empowers business owners to effectively communicate their purpose by teaching them through a systematic process how to find and tell their unique story to impact the world. Built on empathy and the desire to eliminate frustration for business owners, leaders, and nonprofits, J.M. Lacey Communications seeks ways to simplify what has been unnecessarily complicated, using proven systems to achieve results. Jonna has been writing professionally for more than 20 years, including grant writing, and has been writing creatively for 40 years. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, Jonna, for sharing your time and expertise with all of us today. Once again, we will be in touch to share the program recording and a brief survey with you. We look forward to seeing you at our upcoming programs, and we hope to see you again in September. Jonna, take it away.
Thanks so much, Deborah. So just in case you all want to know, I started writing when I was in the womb, so that so it doesn't age me. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, but thank you so much. And one thing she mentioned in that bio, it's so funny to hear your own bio sometimes, but I do not like complication. So I think that you're really going to like this because it's all about trying to uncomplicate your business and your nonprofit. So we're talking about brand storytelling for your organization. Live your brand and communicate your identity to build trust. And as we go through this, that tagline is going to make a whole lot of sense to you by the time we're done with this. So I just want to say at the outset, when it comes to your brand story, that it is a priority. And it should be your first priority to shape and map, because your brand story affects everything. It affects your marketing, your funder relationships, really everything that causes you stress and overwhelm. Well, that's related to your work. I can't help you with the personal stuff. but but for your business, yes, absolutely. We can calm that down. Once your brand story is in place, then it's going to make a lot of your usual stressors a whole lot easier to navigate. So I'm going to explain exactly what that means. So let's go through this. As Deborah mentioned, if you have questions, put them in the chat box. If they need to interrupt me, they will. Otherwise, there's a couple of places I'll pause just in case. And of course, at the end, we can certainly talk then as well. So because I'm talking about brand stories, I think it's better to start with a quote, and it might be one that's familiar to a lot of you, Nicholas Sparks, the author of The Notebook. And he says, every great love starts with a great story, which is so true. But we are really, when it comes to stories, we're emotionally tied to the stories, right? It's how we connect with people, how we see ourselves in the characters. And so emotion, it really needs to be tied into our brand story. So that's why that comes into play. So let's talk about first and foremost what this webinar is going to cover, so that you know why the heck you're sitting here for an hour and listening to all of this and how this is going to relate to you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the difference between brand story versus storytelling. I think it's important for me to clarify this. I mention this because I also attend other webinars on storytelling. And a consistent thing I've noticed with that is that the focus is always on the products. It's on the services or the programs, as opposed to the business or the organization itself. So even though they do complement each other, there are some very unique features between the brand story itself and the act of storytelling. There is a distinction. So I'm just going to clarify that so we know moving forward what that means. Also, we're going to talk about good versus poor brand storytelling, kind of the do's and don'ts here. The benefits of our organization's story. This is going to be helpful, I think, for you too, if you are in a nonprofit, especially, or maybe your client is a nonprofit client and they're really not grasping the importance of having a brand story or using that to the full. So when you understand this yourself and you have a really good baseline, you're going to be able to present this to your board and your leadership, that if they're on the fence regarding the value of highlighting your brand story, this is going to help you to address that. The next thing we're going to talk about is the 4 keys to finding our brand story. And I'm going to give you a hint. That is the meat of this whole webinar. So you definitely will want to stick around for those 4 very easy keys that I will talk about, which is why there's 4 and not 20. How authentic your story should be. We hear that word a lot, authentic, but what does that really mean? How should you be using your authenticity? Using your grant story in your grant applications, how you can divide that up. And of course, sharing the brand story as well. When we talk about marketing, we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on that, but I do want to emphasize some areas that you can use this brand story. I will tell you up front, I have been through this process already myself. I've been through it with this business. I also am an author under a different brand name. So that's another brand story that I've had to build. So I've been through this process. And I will tell you, this is not easy. I would love to sit here and tell you this is so easy. You can do it overnight and then you're done, but I can't. It is time consuming. It could take months. It just depends on how much time and effort or how big your story is and what you're putting into it. But I will tell you this, it is worth it. It's harder when it's your own story. So for example, if you're running your own business, if you're a consultant, it's a whole lot harder to pull yourself back and tell your own story and separate yourself. A little bit easier, I think, if you were to do it for a client, but it's still very involved. However, it is worth the effort, and you'll see why. It's really going to help you in the end on so many things. Once you get this done, as I call it, the foundation, your brand story is your foundation for your organization. It's really going to help you at the end. And so if you, as I mentioned, if you're a consultant running your own business, if you are a small business of any kind, if you are running a nonprofit, if you work in a nonprofit, all of these points are going to be valuable to you. There is something that all of you will be able to take away from that. And that's how I've designed it specifically for that. So let's get into it. First of all, we're going to talk about the difference between brand story and storytelling. And I try hard not to say brand storytelling. Sometimes it slips in there. It is all part of it, but there is a distinction between the two, the actual story versus the telling of it. So let's talk about what those distinctions are. So brand story versus storytelling, while those tie together, there are unique differentiators. First of all, brand story is first and foremost identity. And that identity is related to your organization's values, your vision, and your mission. I'm sure all of that sounds very familiar to you, especially if you're a nonprofit. But even as a business, as a small business owner, you have values. And so your brand story is going to represent all of that. Your brand story is also long-term. You're trying to build engagement with your audience, build a trusting audience. So you're in it for the long haul. This isn't a one and done. This is going to continue over the years, over the decades. So this is exactly what it sounds like long term. It also involves leadership. And I really want to emphasize that, because whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're running a corporation, your leadership team sets the example, don't they? They really are the ones that everyone kind of follows. So whatever they do, whatever they agree with, that's what people are going to do. That's how it is. So your leadership, which in nonprofit would be your board, it could be your executive director to your development director, anybody on the leadership team, all of them have to recognize the value of your brand. How are they doing that? Are they living the brand? You know, I mean, are they taking this with them outside of the organization? Are they all in, so to speak, and supportive of your organization's values and telling your brand story to your community and to your funders? Leadership is going to be a core asset here. If your leadership team is not for this, if they don't agree with it, if they don't see the value in your brand story, if your board is against it, you have a big problem. So I'm telling you, that's why they need to be first and foremost the leaders. Your leadership team need to be the leaders in this. And so this webinar, the points that we're going to be bringing out, if this is something that you need to present to them so that they really understand that, this is going to help you to do that. This is, in a sense, going to give you that that ammunition that you need, although that's kind of a poor word and I apologize, but it's going to give you the nuts and bolts of what you need to be able to present to them. And also brand story personalizes your connection with your audience. If you don't have a connection with them, then you don't have an audience. So they need to see themselves in the picture. And for all of you, and I think all of you really are writers, you'll appreciate this. It's theme rather than plot. And as you know, theme is your overall arc. It's the story. Plot is more event. It has to do with who's involved. There's more action in that. So that would be the difference in that, is that it is the theme. Storytelling, on the other hand, as I said, they do tie in together, but storytelling is really, it's an action word. So storytelling is your marketing. It is the act of communicating your messages. It is telling a story about a specific event, a program, a product, or a service. It is short-lived, and it is plot rather than theme. So you are focused on something specific. For example, I used to work for symphony orchestra, and so we had concerts, right? So that would be, so we marketed those concerts. We told a story as we would come up on those concerts, we'd have the concert, then there'd be the following, and then it's done. It's very short term, very short lived. Doesn't mean it's not important, but that has nothing to do with the actual brand story. So those are going to be the differences, is that your storytelling is more the marketing aspect, and it's more on something specific. Brand story is your foundation. It is your identity and your organization. And I'll emphasize that more as we go so that we understand that fully. But those are the differences between the two. So I just want to make sure that I clarify those so we get them. How about some solid brand storytelling examples? I chose 2 out of hundreds. I'm sure we could all come up with organizations that we know of. We know their story, and they tell a really good brand story. These are just 2 that I happened to choose. They're ones we're familiar with, and I think we have someone from Feeding America on too. So, but these 2 stories these 2 organizations were pretty aware of their programs. They've been around for a long time. It's interesting, though, when it comes to your brand story. And I just said that your brand story is not the program that you're talking about. Because these, if you look at Feeding America, Habitat for Humanity, they have very specific programs in here. But the programs can change. But the organizations do not. The values do not. And your brand story is based on your values. That stays the same. That doesn't change. The reason for their existence does not change, even if the programs do. The programs kind of change with the times, right? What was done maybe 50 years ago is going to be a little bit different today. But the reason for the existence, that hasn't changed. So that's something to keep in mind, is that your brand story, your identity, it equals values. And again, those don't change. But so these 2 are interesting to me, just because if you go to their website and check them in, I always recommend check everybody else, see what they're doing, see what works for them. What do you like out of their brand story that maybe you could use? It's always good to check other sources. But what I really liked about them is that the stories that they had on there, they were from people who either used their services, supported them, but they're very real world stories and examples, and that sits better with us. I think when we see that, we see these human beings talking about how they benefited and why. And so what that's doing is it's building on their brand. It's building on who they are, what they represent, what their vision is. And that's the whole point. So I recommend to check them out, just kind of look through their website and see what their story is about and how all the other things that they do tie right into that story. And that's what you're trying to do for your organization. Like I said, there are other examples. I'm sure you know of some. Check them out. Just check out their brand story and see what you like about it. So if there's any line that I want you to take away from today's webinar, this is the line I want you to remember, is your brand story is about who you are, not what you do. The who versus the what. And kind of like this picture of this girl that I chose, she just is, this is who she is. She doesn't care. She's being true to herself. As your organization, as your business, as your nonprofit, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to be true to yourself. What do your values represent? That's who you are. And that's what you're trying to do here. So remember that. So now we're going to talk about good versus poor brand storytelling. What do you need to avoid in your brand story, and what can you incorporate? Kind of some do's and don'ts here. And by the way, you are going to get copies of these slides too. So if you don't have to take copious notes if you don't want to. But I have tried to lay things out for you as best as I can so that you can view them later. So good brand storytelling, first and foremost, it sets expectations. You're trying to make sure that your audience, your funders, your donors, your clients, they're very clear on what you represent and whether they are even a good fit as partners or customers or clients of yours. So that's when you're being true with your brand story, you're being honest, you're setting the expectations, you're weeding out people who are just not going to be a good fit for you. And as you know, especially in the nonprofit sector, funders are looking for people to partner with. So if they see your values and things that you represent that don't match theirs, then they know that they're not going to be a good fit for you. But then the opposite happens. Then they see that you are a good fit for them because your values match theirs. So that's what you're trying to do, is just make sure that you're clear on that. Good brand storytelling also clarifies your message, who and what you stand for, why you exist, and again, your values. Good brand storytelling highlights your vision and emphasizes your motives. It motivates your audience to support you. It shows your audience that you're interested in solving their problem. And when I talk about audience, again, that could be recipients, it could be funders, it could be staff. They're part of your audience too. They talk about you when they leave work. Could be your clients. So that's when we talk about audience, that's what we're talking about. Really anybody that's going to fit in with the reason that you exist, what you're representing. And also, this is cool too, because your brand story takes your audience on a journey by focusing on something that's really meaningful to them. So good brand story culminates in this journey where people see themselves in your story and they're going to follow you and support you. And I think we could probably all relate to that. I mean, we might see even a commercial or something, or read something and we think, how'd they get into my head? Because that is so me. We've been in that situation. Well, that's what you're trying to do with your brand story. So when it's done right, it's as if people are saying, how they get into my head, how do they know? They really get me. That's what you're looking for, because those are the ones who are going to stick with you and they're going to support you for the long term. What brand storytelling is not. Brand storytelling is not a logo. It is not your website design. It is not a sales pitch. It is not a donation request. And it is not an exaggeration of your brand or bragging without proof. The cool thing is if you do your brand story very well, it's going to eliminate the need to directly sell to people. So wouldn't it be nice if you could have conversations with, say, future funders and donors, and you're not actually asking them for money? You're just having a relationship building conversation. You know, that's the whole point, is that you are trying to avoid actually directly asking people for donations, which I'm sure you understand because you've probably been through it. That's going to alleviate a lot of stress right there, because when you're talking with someone, you're not always thinking the money thing. You know, nonprofits need money. We know that. Even as business owners, we need money. We have to keep running. But if that's not something that you're worried about, if you know that the people that you're talking to, in a way, they're already sold on you, they're already sold on on who you are, they're sold on your organization and what you're doing for the community, then they'll be the ones bringing up those questions. So that's something to think about, is if that's a stress that you want to alleviate, that's what your brand story is going to do for you. So those are the do's and don'ts there, kind of in a nutshell. So now we have all of that. We have the difference between brand story versus storytelling, what is good versus what is bad. But most important, what are going to be the benefits of your brand story? And this is something, especially for those of you that have to present this to your board, to your leadership, or your clients. If any of you have clients that they do not have a good brand story in place, and you've been trying to work with them on that, because I'm sure you noticed that, because you're the ones that have to tell their story, right? You're the ones that are filling out their grant applications, and you know what's missing. This is what you're going to need to present to them. So let's get into that. Excuse me. Here are some benefits of brand stories that you can present to your clients and to your leadership. Benefits of brand stories have a powerful effect on our emotions. brand stories touches hearts. It creates interest and curiosity. And I think we understand that. I think we understand the emotional aspect behind it. There's a commercial, I won't say which, it's a commercial, you know. But man, I see it and I cry. It's just, and it's funny because I don't know these people. I mean, I just use the products. I don't know these people, but it's just kind of interesting how when the story is told so well that you can move people to tears, you can move people to laugh. You know, brand stories don't have to be tug at your heartstrings all the time. I did an article back in February when we had the Super Bowl, and it was on the brand stories that they did for the commercials. And the reason I did it was most of their stories actually made you laugh. They brought joy, and they really pulled you in. And it just was intriguing to me, how they were telling these stories. So that's something to keep in mind, is that you don't have to make people cry to pull people in. They can just find joy in the story that you're telling them. And so the point is, though, you're touching their heart. So in what way are you doing that? In what way are you pulling them in? And of course, creating that interest and that curiosity. Your brand story establishes your expertise and your credibility. Why should people trust you? Why should they come to you? Builds trust. That ties into that. It focuses again on your values. So this is who you are. This is your identity. And the people who share your values are going to be able to connect with you. They're going to relate to that. And that's what you're trying to do with your brand story. You are creating a loyal audience, and they will do the selling for you. If your story is done well, they'll tell their friends, just like we do. We always tell people if there's something that we like, oh, you have to check this out, or whatever. That's what you're trying to do. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that too, of how to do that. But that's what you're doing, is creating a loyal audience. Your brand story also shows your organization as human, especially if you are an organization that's fairly large. But even so, what you're doing is you're kind of breaking down that wall so that people get a behind the scenes look
Yeah.
at how your organization.
It's just the 25% Scott Peterson.
There we go. How your organization operates, who's running it, what it's built upon. What you're trying to do is connect with your supporters. Humans relate to other humans, and that's what we need to see. So it's not just some entity. There's actually human beings behind it. Your staff, they're doing a lot of work too. Volunteers. That's what you're trying to show your audience, is who's there, who's really helping to run that. Your brand story epitomizes your organizational culture. Culture is who you are. Culture is based on values, and your brand story is telling that story, is telling people that. So they'll be able to figure it out. They'll be able to know exactly what you stand for by your brand story. Again, your audience is telling your story for you. So that came up sooner than I thought, but that's your audience is kind of like, you think of those water cooler moments and people are just chatting and you only have a few seconds. But if your brand story is so clear, it's so succinct, others are able to tell your brand story for you. So there you go. There's your word of mouth marketing. And especially if it's something that they benefited from, and they really understand how your organization works and it operates, they're going to be able to tell other people that too. And so that's what you're trying to do, is create that. So that also helps you. That's one bit of marketing you don't have to do, because somebody's doing it for you. And brand stories inspire your audience. It moves them to action and shapes your marketing. So overall, brand story is designed to alleviate overwhelm. Once you have your brand story in place, as I said, it's not something you can do overnight. But once you have that in place, this is your foundation. That hard work to get to that foundation of your organization, to show people in your community what you represent, and even as an employer, once you have all that in place, then things will be a whole lot easier for you. It's a lot of work, but get that in place and then you'll see. Then you'll see that other things work out. As I said, I've been through this myself, and I noticed when I had done that, especially for this business, then when it came to my marketing, I knew exactly what to pull. I knew for what, what was going to match what marketing piece that I was going to do, which I'll talk about a little bit further in, but you'll notice that it's going to be a lot easier for you. And it's easier for you to know, you'll know your organization better. You'll be able to tell your story better once you have it down. So those are the benefits of having a brand story in place. So, and again, just kind of in a nutshell there, I don't want to overwhelm, but I just wanted to give you some of the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of that. So that's where that is. Hopefully I've clarified the difference between brand stories and storytelling and all the benefits before we get into the 4 keys that I've promised you as the meat of the webinar. So let me just ask real quick, are there any questions before I move forward? Anything I need to clarify? Or not?
So
Okay.
Deborah, you're muted. I just had a quick question, Jana.
Okay, sure.
Should you be updating the language of your brand story periodically, or is that something that you should just form and keep because you want people to trust you and not see you as wishy-washy, or should you be updating to keep with the times? You know what I mean? I'm curious.
Yeah, so that's a good question, because and I do talk about this a little further on, because some organizations have been around for decades. So if you have some language that was written, say, 100 years ago, I would check that. But the foundation of the actual story wouldn't change, because again, it's based on your values. So those shouldn't change. Now, the programs that shape those values and go along with them, those are the things that'll change, and that you'll be doing separate stories for those too. But the actual reason for your existence, the whole reason that you started in the first place, it's unlikely that has changed. I mean, I would have to see something specific, and I'm talking way back. I mean, if there, because there are organizations that have been around a long time. I think I didn't check it, but United Way might be one of them. They've been around for several decades, right? And of course, the examples that I use, the Feeding America, Habitat for Humanity. I mean, those things have been around for a long time too. But the purpose hasn't changed, the values haven't changed. So once you have your story in place, your brand story, your reason for being, that's not going to change. How you navigate that, that likely will adjust, and you might refer to that. But again, the whole, why you founded something, why you started something, that shouldn't, because your values won't change. Our
Okay,
values.
thank you.
Yeah, our values are who we
great.
are. So, Jeff?
Yeah. Nope. I have a question. So I run a children's museum, and children's museums are very much underestimated. People think it's just a place for play. Yet play is so important to a child growing up. Einstein said play is intelligence having fun. So people sort of discount it as just sort of a place to burn off energy. And so many museums in the field have really turned themselves into, they've sort of gone along with that, and they think there's edutainment, or that we just become a family destination because you need something to do. So one of our most unvisited pages is about us, right? So if you're going to learn anything about why we exist, you're going to find it on About Us. So I've been thinking of putting on my landing page just below the fold, where we have more boxes, a box about, why we're here. We're here, why? And talking about the power of play, what museums do, how it's so, important in a child's development. So I know you said your website isn't your brand, but we do have a lot of visitation, but it's to visit, I mean, sometimes we have donors go to the website, right, and they will see about us. But we want other people to become donors that aren't donors. So I just wanted your opinion about putting on our landing page something where they can hit it and go to a page and it's going to talk about the power of play, all the skills that children develop, within this kind of environment. I just was looking for your opinion on that.
Yeah, so website, you still need to have your website, and your brand story is going to go on that. I mentioned it earlier too, because I just didn't want people to get confused with the actual marketing aspect or with the fact that I have this beautiful logo, so there's my brand. That's not, that is not what we're talking about here. But with your brand story, and I'll go into a little more detail as we move on it, but your brand story should be huge. I mean, your brand story could fit a book, and a lot of people do put out books. They put out memoirs. You're not going to be able to put all of that on your website. There's just no way. But as you mentioned, Jeff, too, there are ways you can do it. If you go to the About page, your About page, your home page and your About pages are your two most important pages on your website. So the About page really gives kind of a snippet, kind of a screenshot of this is what you're about, but you have other links, you have other directions that you're taking them. So if they want to know something specific, for example, what the programs are designed to do, what children can do when they come to the museum, with the things that they can look forward to, what parents can appreciate, or, however you set that up. So those are all going to be bits. Those are all going to be bits of your brand story. You're tying them all in. It's just that you're not putting it all on the entire page. But you do want to use your website. Your website is going to be your biggest tool that you use to highlight your brand story. Next might be your book. Like I said, I mean, there are a lot of leaders that they have their own book, right? Because they have this story that they think that they need to tell in 300 pages. So, it just depends on the organization, and that's fine. But you're just not going to have room for all of that. So the question is, how do you use bits and pieces of that to make sure it's clear? Because you want to make sure that you have clarity for your audience. So the audience that goes to the website, and maybe as a children's museum too, maybe you have a page specifically for the children, so that because kids are very good with technology. You give them a tablet or a phone and they're gone. So maybe there's a special page for them that they go to that excites them about going to the museum. But the parents and guardians and teachers, and they all need the other pages too, so they know how to incorporate that into the lessons that they are teaching these children. But absolutely, Jeff, you should be using your website, but you can divide it up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, we will move on, because we want to get to these keys. As I said, the meat of this webinar, what are the 4 keys to finding your brand story? So let's get right to the first one, which is purpose. What is the purpose of your story? Why did you start your company or your organization, your nonprofit? Excuse me, what was your passion behind it? Was there a need for your product or service that did not exist? And what change or changes do you seek to make? So the purpose of our brand story helps us elaborate on all the important elements of our reason for existing, why our business exists, why our nonprofit exists. Knowing the purpose of our story is going to catapult us toward the overarching theme of who we are and what we stand for. And as mentioned a couple of times here, there's a lot of organizations that might be decades old, but even you, as a consultant, as a business owner, maybe you're 20 years old, maybe you've been doing this for 20 years. What happens is, over time, we get so focused on our activities and servicing the community and servicing our clients and running the organization that we actually lose sight of why we exist. So that's why this is really good from time to time periodically to step back and ask yourself this question again. And again, if you are decades old, then you go back to the original story, go back to the original founder. Are you still following that whole purpose, you know, what the brand represents? Do you need to make some changes? So that's really knowing your purpose is going to help you to make any adjustments that you need to make with that. So that is number one, what is the purpose of your story? Number two, here we go, trend connection. I'm just gonna be honest with you, this is my least favorite. Only because this is the hardest one for me. I don't know why. Maybe it's great for all of you, especially if you love data. I do not. But it's so important. You have to know your audience. Who is your audience? Why are they your audience? What is it that they need? How are you filling those needs? And how will you pivot when there is change? And I think the reason that I hate it is because this is kind of where I don't have as much control as I'd like to, because your audience is who dictates the trends. So you have to understand the trends to know your audience. So when we're trying to establish credibility in our work and connect with people, we need to know what the trend connection is. In other words, what's important to them and what direction are they going in and why? And in order to do that, we have to understand the audience and the trend, and you see how they connect, just hence the word connection. So they do connect, the audience and the trends connect. When you pivot, how will you pivot when there is change? We've been through change, haven't we? COVID was, you know, a huge change for a lot of us. What you're trying to do when you know your subject better than anybody else, whether you're running the nonprofit or you're running your business to, you know, to help these nonprofits or other clients, you are the one that is studying the direction. You're studying the reaction that people have, their habits, so that you can systematically predict where the next trend will lead. You don't know the future. I'm not saying that you have to do that. Sometimes you kind of go along with the flow, but because you know it so well, you can kind of anticipate, you know, this looks like this is the direction this is going in. And a lot of people can do that. A lot of experts do that in many areas. So that's what you're doing, is you're trying to predict that and being prepared. And when you're prepared, that's going to help you to navigate the disorder and ride the bumps that you end up encountering, because shifts in trend happen. We can't control them. But you're going to prove that you understand them so much that you can smoothly pivot with them. And that's what you're after. People who, the loyal following that you're building have seen that. They know that you're not perfect either, but they can see that you're really trying, you're making that attempt, you're headed in the right direction, and they're going to stick with you during those crazy times of change. So what is the trend connection in your business? In your organization? Number three, emotional connection. Authenticate your emotional connection. What are the needs of your audience and how do you relate to them? What obstacles did you overcome? What lessons did you learn? What are your solutions? And what was your aha moment, or that light bulb moment, however you want to call that? It's good. It's very good to be honest about our challenges. That's where that word authentic comes into play. What you don't want to do is focus solely on those challenges. You don't want to focus on your sad sob story and, you know, how you've hit the ground and you're down and you're still there, because you know what, then you're going to drag people down with you. What you're trying to do is very quickly, you will show them the background, but then you're going to very quickly pull them out and say, this is the solution. This is how I solved this. That's what you want to focus on, is you want to focus not so much on the problems, but the actual solutions. So what you're trying to do, again, building that emotional connection with them, showing your audience that you understand their needs, that you get them, but you want to provide solutions to their problems. And that's what they're going to be most interested in. So that's what you have to remember about when you're being authentic. And you don't have to be so authentic that you tell like really icky stories. I mean, there's some things you should keep to yourself. So we're not saying to, you know, bear all, but what's going to help them, you know, only share the things that are going to help them, the things that you've overcome, how you've done it, and build that connection with them. And when we are emotionally connected with our audience, the bond with them is so much deeper and a lot more impactful, and they're going to be a lot more loyal to us. So that's what you're trying to do. So that's the third one. So the fourth one is your meaningful value proposition. And you've probably heard this too. Being in business, we hear this a lot. So why is your organization the right organization to bring about change? How does your experience or your experiences tie into your expertise? And what makes your organization attractive to your audience or to your clients? So your experience here is you're showing people that you are credible, why they should trust you, why they should trust your organization. In other words, you're answering the question for them, what gives you the right to service your audience? And that's what you're doing with your value proposition. You're showing them, so you're answering those questions and you're showing them that you have value, you know what you're talking about, they can trust you. So that's what you're doing with these 4 keys. So here they are kind of in a nutshell. Again, your 4 keys, because I love keeping it simple, your 4 keys, your purpose of your story, your trend connection, your emotional connection, and your value proposition. I will say that I do actually have each of these in detail on my site. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a link on each of the slides. So if you want to read the article a little bit deeper, then I'll just connect you right to that. So the PDF will have those links available to you to check out. So anyway, those are the 4 keys to finding your brand story. In a nutshell, are there any questions regarding the 4 keys that I can answer before we move on?
I just want to note that we have 9 minutes.
Yes, we do. So I will move on. So almost done.
I got a question.
Okay.
Okay, and pardon me, I'm in the middle of moving, but this webinar was important to me. I do outreach for an organization called CHOICE. That's an acronym for Consumers Helping Others in a Caring Environment.
Okay.
We have plenty of good stories, but here's our issue. We have 5 different programs, from homeless is what we're noted for, getting the homeless off the street, care plans, getting them everything they need from medical to housing, etc. But we also deal, and we're motivated by mental illness, physical disability, people trying to stay out of jail, people caught in the criminal justice system, people coming out of the criminal justice system, as well as people who are food insecure and may have problems staying in their homes. Now, a sort of an unofficial mantra is people not living their best lives. And so to come up with a single, I understand our values, but to come up with a single concept, because what we do in plain speak is, if your life is in bad shape, we can help you. And we have the numbers, we've been very successful, but in terms of branching out and getting more people, we have word of mouth more than anything else. We have a mediocre website, I will say that openly, but
Did we lose Robert?
Robert, I think we lost you. So what I'm going to suggest is that you send in your question.
Yeah.
And John, I think John is willing to take the time to answer. So
Yes.
we will be in touch. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's just move on here. And so we're going to talk about how we inspire our audience. Very simple here. Oh, look, there's only 4 points. Move your audience to action, right? So we are focusing on your values first and foremost. Again, this is your identity. This is who you are. To what makes your brand unique. The 4 keys that we just talked about will help you stand out. Being authentic, be human, be real, and then apply a narrative structure to your brand story, which your brand story has a framework. It helps your audience understand what you're about, and it includes meticulous research, planning, and objectives. So that's what you want, is you want your audience to do something, and they're going to do something based on the story that you tell them. So so that's kind of that in a nutshell. We need to get into, though, how this is going to help your funder relationships for those of you who are in the nonprofit sector and who also help clients in the nonprofit sector. Your brand story is for you first and foremost. As I've mentioned before, it could be so big it can fill a book. You're not going to have the room to put all of that story on a grant application. There's just no way you can do that. However, you having your brand story and your organization having its brand story means that you know what appropriate elements you're going to be able to use in that application. That's what you're trying to do. And so depending on what you're applying for, the program, there's going to be different elements of your brand story that you'll be using. The most important thing, though, is that you know your story better than anyone else. And so that's what you're using it for. That it's like your backup story. So you're pulling out what's necessary. Funders and individual donors want your story. And when I say that, we're focused more on your organization, not so much the program. Yes, they're funding the program. We get, I understand that. But the questions here, why should they give to you? What problems are you solving? How are you solving them? That is about your organization, because you are looking for long-term partnerships with these funders and donors, right? Even your clients too. They want to know, how is my money being used here? Funders have their values. They know where they're going. Are you a good fit for them? So if they see all of that, then now you have a long-term relationship, and that's what you're looking for. So your brand story is used to build and strengthen those relationships. It's going to appeal to future funders even before you apply for grants. But if you're well known in the community, by the time they get your application, maybe they've never worked with you before, they see your name and they say, you know what, I know this organization. I've heard of them. I've heard this, and this about them. That's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to establish that relationship with them, so that by the time they get the application, it's almost as if they're sold on it. I mean, there's no guarantees, we know that, but this is really what your goal is. The program that you apply for grant funding is a part of your organization, but your business itself is the brand. That is your brand story. Those are the distinctions with those two. So excuse me, I just have this frog in my throat that doesn't want to go anywhere. So now we're talking about sharing your brand story, and I'm just going to briefly go through this. This is what I was emphasizing before. You are not going to have room to put your entire story on your website or your newsletter or your social media, but you're going to be taking bits and pieces of it and putting it in the appropriate places. So you have opportunity here with your website and your newsletters. You have opportunity with your either your blog posts, articles, whatever you want to call them, your advertisements, other marketing materials, if you want to write a book, donor letters, social media meaning, television, radio, newspaper. And then of course, when you have conversations with people, your business so well, your brand story so well, you're sharing it. There's something I really want to point out here, though, very quickly, is that I'm not against social media, but you do not own social media. So you could have this incredible following on, say, your Facebook page that you've built up for your organization. Meta goes in and changes the algorithm, and then you wake up in the morning and you have lost everybody. It has happened. So I'm not saying don't use social media, but that's a backup. And that's not something where you should put your time, effort, attention, money. Your time, attention, effort, and money for your organization should be in your website and your newsletters. If you do not have a newsletter, I'm telling you, you need to have a newsletter. I know people are groaning if you don't have one, because it is a lot of work. I have two. It is a lot of work. Your newsletters are bringing people back to your website. And your website is where you're sharing your story, is where you're drawing people into your organization, is where you have a donate button, not your newsletter, but the newsletter is your tool to bring people to your website. That's what you should be. Those are the two things that you should be doing. And the same thing with your donor letters. Those are opportunities to share your brand story also, because you should be sending multiple thank you donor letters through the year, not just the year-end donor letter that says, please donate for our year-end giving. When you send your thank you letters to your donors, you should be sharing snippets of that story. This is what your donations are doing for our organization. And then the next letter, this is what we've been able to do further. The next letter, this is another story. That's what you're doing with these letters. And in fact, you're not asking for donations in those letters because you're thanking them. So these are some really excellent areas where you can pull your brand story apart and use them in that marketing. So last slide.
John, I just need to interject here for 1 second and just say that Jonna is willing to stay on for another 10 minutes or so if anybody has questions beyond this moment, because I know some of you may have to leave now at 1 o'clock.
And I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay. Last slide.
Okay, so information here if you need it. This 10 questions to ask yourself to find your story. A lot of what's in this webinar came from that. It's free. So there's a magic word that we all love. It's free. So you go to you just sign up for the newsletter and you will get that as a download. You can print it off or you can do it right on your computer to fill in, but it will help guide you through all these questions if you want to start building on your brand story and get started on that. That's what's going to help you with that. And then last slide is because I started it with a quotation, we're going to end with a quotation. Philip Pullman, the author, says, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. That's what we're attracted to. Stories are the human connection. So then the question is, what is your story? And
Thank you. So does anybody have a question for Jonna? All right, I'm not being overwhelmed by questions. So
Wow.
I will just say that as Jonna noted, we're going to be sending out this presentation. She's sending us a PDF with links to make things really easy and easy for you to develop these ideas even further with lots of great information. She has her contact information in there. And I just want to say again, Jonna, thank you so much for giving us your time today. We really, really appreciate it. And just want to remind everybody that we're having Consultants Virtual Breakfast on the 12th. I'm seeing lots of clapping for you, Jonna. And earmarks on the 19th. And once again, just to remind you, if you're not a member and you do want to become a member, you can use our coupon code in the chat, and the fee for this will be rolled into your membership fee. All right. Thank you, Jonna.
I'm muted. Thank you so much. I just really appreciate you all sitting through that.
No, it was wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Well, I enjoy telling stories. So anyway, I try to keep it simple.
It's very good.
It was very clear. Yeah.
Very clear.
Oh, thank
I
you.
liked having tangible steps. I love that.
Yeah. Now, I actually had, when I did this for my GPA group in May, most of them are like, oh my gosh, these 4 keys. And they were just so excited about that. So I said, okay, that's good. That's staying in. So, anything we can do to help, help make our case, especially with the board and, other people that, because sometimes they don't get it. So we need to show them.
Well, I thought that was good. Melaine, I don't know if you have anything you want to say to Jonna, because I'm noticing that you're staying on a little later, or Carol.
I just really appreciated this, and it's going to be very helpful in the future.
Thank you. And you'll get the slides too. So you'll get all the links, and hopefully I represented Feeding America. Okay.
I think you did.
Yeah. So.
All
Well,
right.
that was great.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Carol, so good to see you.
Nice to see you all too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.